You know, the most exciting part of today's gospel text is the realization of the intentional plan of God in Jesus' interaction with the Samaritan woman at the well. The use of the Greek word "dei" shows that Jesus had to go through Samaria, which means that there was divine necessity or intent. It was not just a mere coincidence that Jesus met the Samaritan woman at the well. It was God's plan all along. This realization is significant because it reveals Jesus' identity as the Messiah, and this interaction alters the course of history. Moreover, the woman's marginalized status as a Samaritan and her interesting marital history shows that Jesus' message of salvation is for all people, regardless of their social status, sexual identity, or ethnicity. This realization is a reminder of the transformative power of Jesus' message and how it transcends human divisions. Overall, this encourages us to reflect on our own encounters with Jesus and how they can be transformative experiences that shape our lives. In the summer of 2015, Pam and I climbed aboard a charter bus with our youth group for a 625-mile trip to Detroit, Michigan for the ELCA Youth Gathering. It felt like a really long trip. Well, that is until we moved to South Florida and had to travel back to North Carolina. We had a great time experiencing all the fun and fellowship with a big event like that. Watching young people being exposed to new things, realizing that they were looking across a river at Canada, finding exciting places to eat, hearing fantastic speakers, and exciting music and worship. But right beside all of those things was a different type of growth experience, one of the transformative types that is unsettling. That's where the connection to the word happened for me this week. After reading the gospel for today and the first lesson, I started to learn more about them. Here's a few tidbits and trivia that I found. You know how fairy tales tend to follow that formula? Damsel in distress, some evil person or being, handsome prince type, big rescue, kiss, happily ever after? Well, as it turns out, Wes Howard Brooke noticed that in the case of Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Rachel, or Moses and Zipporah, the dynamics are remarkably similar. A man comes to a well, finds a maiden there, asks her for a drink. They converse. She runs home to tell her people what's happened. They return with her to the well and approve the man. He returns to their home and marries the maiden. And Richard Esslinger added to that list. In every case, the resulting marriage alters the course of history for the covenant people. So here we are with Jesus and a woman by a well. The formula probably would not have been missed by the early audiences of the scripture. This story, two strangers talking, is the longest conversation recorded by John. These events come shortly after Jesus' interaction with Nicodemus, and the woman is pretty much the mirror opposite of Nicodemus. Jew versus Samaritan, man versus woman, marginalized versus insider and leader, dark of night versus light of day. She gets it, he doesn't. He remains silent, she tells everybody. A big deal in John's writing are the 7 I am statements. I am the bread of life, the light of the world, the door, the good shepherd, the resurrection and the life, the way and the truth, and the life and the true vine. But did you notice that this too is an I am statement, and that for some reason it's not counted in the statements? Actually, it is the first I am statement, and it is not metaphorical like the others. Jesus reveals his identity as the Messiah to a female, non-Jewish person with an interesting marital history and living situation that we are not privy to. Here's a really cool thing. This was intentional. It was God's plan. Well, how do we know that? There's a little Greek word that falls right before the reading for today. Why they left this out, I don't know, because it's very important. It says, now he had to go through Samaria. Pastor, of course he did. Samaria is was in the way of where he wanted to go. True, I would expect that to be the case too, but I found out that this little word, day, that's the word that gives us the words had to. The thing is that word is used in John to show divine necessity or intent. Another word would have been used otherwise. Also, by the book, Jesus should have traveled around Samaria. So God's plan was for Jesus to be in Samaria. And last little tidbit, by the law, everything about the interaction would have made Jesus unclean, touching her ladle and jar, much less drinking from them. So all of this information and my thoughts turned to the Detroit bus? Yes. In combination with the first lesson, I saw a study question that asked if I had ever been thirsty. Well, I thought about that long and hard. I thought about the Israelites out in the wilderness and the panic that must have set in and the anger that they had felt in their panic, and wondered if I had ever been close to anything like that situation. Well, I leaned back in my chair and I thought about it for a while. Oh, I seriously doubt it, but I gave it a whirl. I thought about weirdness and water coinciding in my life. In just a moment, I thought of Jake and Garrett and our trip. It was service project day, and we had begun the day standing in an absolute pouring rain for about 2 hours, waiting on the bus to take us to our location. We got to a neighborhood where they were trying to get abandoned houses torn down because they were creating a lot of problems. They had very few resources like plywood, and a law stated that a house had to be boarded up for so many weeks before it could be demolished. They also had little availability of folks that knew how or were able to do such a thing. Well, I said that I would take 2 of my guys and that we would get it done because they had some plywood that was pulled off another raised house. See, the problem at that time, and really continuing on until today, is that the auto industry declined there in Detroit. People fled the Detroit area. The population went from over 2 million down to around 600,000. Lots of abandoned houses and a destroyed tax base. Times are very hard there. And the year before, the city had started an aggressive water bill non-payment initiative. In 2014, they had cut off the water to 33,000 households. That's non-vacant households, and were continuing into 2015. This also coincided with the Flint water crisis just down the road. So surrounding us in the neighborhood that we were in were folks with no running water. I had Jake and Garrett on the other side of the house getting some measurements and stuff, and I was trying to get the ladder set to board a window up. Well, I stepped on the bottom rung and the legs sunk into the ground, all the way to the rung. Good grief, a couple of hours of rain and the ground here is that soft? That's about when the guys came back to me and told me that there was some water in the basement. Guys, this house is all messed up. It was pouring down rain. Of course there's some water in the basement. Well, okay. So they headed back around the house. Well, I'm struggling with this ladder and this window, and the thought of some water in the basement of a house that's going to be torn down. Come on, guys. Inexperienced young people. Am I right? Well, I kept working. They reappear shortly. We think you should come check this out. Okay, but a little frustrated with the mess on my side of the house and being interrupted. Little did I know that they had used their time to grill up a whole platter full of crow for me to eat. I followed them, and they pointed into the exterior basement door. It was really bright outside and sunny at that time, and it was really dark inside. I didn't see a problem, and I almost stepped in to look around. Well, my eyes adjusted. The basement was full of water. It would have been close to over my head. It was good, clear water, and it was running into the backyard at my feet. I looked back at the guys. We told you so. That was why the ground was so wet. It wasn't the rain. The backyard was a marsh. The house had been stripped. That means all the copper had been pulled out, and the water company that was so protective of its water hadn't turned the water off. So, free-flowing water into a basement for at least 3 months, we found out. You got a real sense of what the thirsty Israelite anger was like there. Why would anyone mention it? That's the water company's problem. It's a big problem. All that real life water everywhere. There are so many stories of life without running water there and how people are making do. A mom that gathers loose change each week and fills buckets at the car wash so that she and her children can bathe, and many other stories. So I'd been to the heart of the water crisis, one that still continues. So our feet were wet with water, that if you drank it or bathed in it, you would be thirsty and dirty again. I almost swam in it. In reality, it was very abundant there. With that amount of saturation, I was surprised the house was still standing. On one of our wagon trips down the street to get some more plywood, used plywood that is, that's when the three of us walked through living water. A woman was standing in front of her house with tears in her eyes watching us work. She approached us and thanked us. I didn't feel like we were doing anything very special. I love doing carpentry. I wasn't having to shovel trash at the other place. The three of us were happy and having a good time. No thanks necessary. She then shared. That was her friend's house. Someone did a drive-by and her friend was shot while pregnant. They, the perpetrators, had come by the next night and tried to burn the house down. Well, our friend had survived, but she was gone. The lady was so glad that this reminder of her sadness was going to be gone. She saw no way that it was going to get boarded up so that it could be torn down because there were so many other problems in the neighborhood and no resources. She told us that her prayers were being answered. Oh, wow. The real thirst is for living water. The woman at the well was there at midday. That's not the time that a woman went to draw water. So she's an outsider in her own outsider community, probably because something was up with her marital relationships. And Jesus sees her, talks to her, asks to drink after her, knows all about her. A really, really big deal. An embrace in the midst of thirst and aloneness. And she goes and shares it with others. It says in Hebrews, continue in brotherly love. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have entertained angels without knowing it. We had no idea. We weren't engaging in some lofty, noble pursuit. We're just trying to help out. Maybe it's like that Dei Greek word with divine agency. I struggled pretty hard with the living water thing this week and not thirsting anymore. But I think the key is that where the Spirit is, God makes a way. God quenches thirst. God sends us. If God's people care for one another, no one will be hungry or thirsty or naked or alone. So as the people asked Moses in Exodus, is the Lord among us or not? The answer is a definite yes. Yes to overflowing. Sometimes we're just unaware that our mission is to be God's presence in the world. God's work, our hands. Like the Samaritan woman sharing living water. Amen.